Hello, just a quick introduction to Git. And I'm going to just talk for a second about Git concepts. Git is a snapshot-based system. That means each commit that we make is a snapshot, not a delta, which means that every time you make a commit, you're making an entire copy of everything that you've created. So this may take a little bit more space, but it's usually negligible in today's world of large disks. So nearly every operation is local. It is possible to do everything local, which I'm going to do in this very first video. And this means that all the history of the project at the time you copied it is local, and you can view it without taking a walk over to the server, if you will, or getting something from a server system, like GitLab or GitHub. And you can work offline, which we're going to be doing. Provided you cloned your repository or repo from a server, you'd be offline. Here, I'm going to be doing everything local, so there is no server to work offline from. And the snapshot directory is stored in a special directory named Git. Now, if you look at my test repo here and I do an ls or an ls-l, there is nothing here. Now, I'm working in Windows right now. This is Windows Subsystem for Linux. And there's nothing here at all. So if I go ahead and I do a get init, then I'll initialize a empty Git repository. And again, it's not going to show anything unless I ls-all, and then you'll see a .get file there. And if I look into this .get file, there's a head of branches, config, description, hooks, whatever, okay? All the different stuff that we've just initialized a database of the repository. And we don't ever work in there. So we're just going to forget right now that that exists, but that is where everything is. If you ever need to know, that's it. And that is our repository. So when somebody says a repository, that is the repository, that .get. The next thing is the working directory, and that's where I am right now. So if I do an ls-a, I can see that there's a .get. That designates that this directory is under Git management, and this is my working directory. There's nothing here right now. And in fact, if I do a get log, your current branch master does not have any commits yet. So I don't have anything in the log. There's nothing there at all. So if I do a get commit, so I'm going to make a snapshot of an empty, okay, get commit, and I'm going to leave a message for that saying this is my first empty commit, okay. So now when I say get log, it doesn't have any commits. On branch method, nothing to commit. I haven't added anything, so I actually have to add something before I do a commit. So that brings us sort of down to our working directory in the staging area. So I'm going to go ahead and just do let's do code dot, sorry, it looks like we're updating here for just a second. And I'll actually go ahead and create something in here. So if I look in here, I have nothing right now. So I can create a file, we'll call it readme, okay? And we'll say, this is a simple Git repository for fun. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And now, let me just minimize that for a minute. If I do an ls, there's a readme. If I do a get commit, or if I do a get status, this tells me that there are no commits yet. There is an untracked file called readme, and there's nothing added to the commit, but untracked files are present. Use get add to track. Well, I am going to add this, so I do a get add, and I'm going to go ahead and say readme. Now I could do a get add dot, and that would add everything in this directory. But for right now, I'll save that for a little bit later down the road. So now if I do get status, it says, hey, there's a new file and it's ready to be committed. So it says use get rm-cache file to unstage. So if I wanted to remove something from a stage file, but these are now my staged files. So I can do a get commit -m first commit of readme. Okay. And it says one file changed, one insertion, created mode, blah, 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 readme. And I say, all right, now if I do get status, it says, you're on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree is clean. Okay. So there's a branch called master. We'll talk about branches later, but for right now, if you're just working by yourself, you know, this is what we kind of have to do. You work on stuff, and you know, you create some things, and so we're going to pop our back up into here, and we're going to create another field called index.html, and we'll go ahead and say this is doc type HTML, and this is body, head, oh wait a minute, not body, head, title, hello world app, and we'll go down here and just put in body, let's do h1 hello world. Okay, very simple something. Now that I did forget to put in an HTML, and so I'm going to put that on the bottom here. I'm going to save that, and you'll notice that this is green, this is unstaged right now, or untracked, so I would have to add that. I could do it all through here, but I'm just doing this from right now. I want to do this all from the command prompt. So if I do a get status again, you'll notice that index.html is not included. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say get add dot. Okay, that says just add everything that's in this directory. Get status shows it's there now. So I'm going to do a get commit -m, and I'm going to say added index.html. Okay, and don't forget that we now have multiple commits, and if I do a get log, we'll have two different ones. This head, that is, this is where you are. It's currently pointing to the branch master, so we're not going to worry about this too much right now. I'll talk about branches, like I said, more often. But the beautiful thing about this is that I can actually check out this commit. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to say get checkout that. Okay. You are in detached head state. You can look around, make experimental changes to commit them, and you can discard any commits you make in this state without impacting any branches by switching back to a branch. If you want to create a new branch to retain commits, blah, 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 or undo this operation with get switch dash. Now, get switch dash will actually change me back to the latest one. So we'll use that here in a minute. But the thing that I want to impress upon you is that there is no more index.html because I'm no longer working in that commit. I'm actually looking at a different commit. Now, this gives you some advice, which I read there. And if I just say get switch dash commit of readme switch branch to master, and I do ls, now I'm back in my branch or my commit. So I can say get status, nothing on branch master, nothing to commit. If I did the get checkout or get switch, and I think I can do get switch, branch is expected, sorry, get checkout, we have to do the checkout. and I do get status here, it'll say head is detached at FF0E F6C. Okay, that's the first, what, 7 letters of the state, which is usually enough to identify it, but I can always say get, get log if I want to see what that is. And it says nothing to commit working tree is clean, but I am now, only have README. So I can switch back and forth from things. Generally speaking, we don't want to go back or we don't want to reset something, but we can do a get reset if I want to. I can get reset back to this version, if you will, or this commit. And look at that. So this brings us now to a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to do a get switch dash to get back to my location, and I have everything there. And if I do get status, again, it'll say I'm on master branch, nothing to commit, working tree is clean. Okay, so what do we got here so far? We've looked at files that we created that were not committed and not staged. Okay, so they weren't part of the repository. We hadn't added them to the repository, and we had to do a get add to add those in. So once we have them there, then we had them staged, and once we have them staged, we can commit them, which makes them committed. And that's what they are right now. So let's edit one because we haven't really done that yet. We just created files. So let's go through and say hello world /p. This is the typical hello world goodbye world application that does absolutely nothing. Okay, don't forget to add a copyright notice or something, right? Which we're not going to do. So I save that here, and you'll notice that this changed to modified M. And if we look over here and I do an ls, you can't really see that. But if I do a get status, you can see that it now says this is modified. Now it's not staged, it's just modified. And if I want to commit this, I have to say get commit dash, get add, and I can do dot. If I want to commit everything, we'll just do dot. And now everything's committed, and I can say get status, and it's modified, and I can say get commit dash m modified expanded index.html to include a paragraph with it. Okay, you can make that as long as you want. And if I do get status again, I'll be back on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. And again, in Visual Studio Code, I now have both of these without any markings over here as being clean. They're set up and committed. Okay. Okay, so if you ever wanted to, you could then go back and look at the history of what you've done. And we can do that here by checking things out and looking at it, or we can just look at the difference between two files. So let's do that right now before we get too far into branching and other things. First, I'm going to do this from the command line so that you can see, and I'm going to do a get diff, and I'm just going to look at the head. That is where I'm pointing to now, and I want to go like one back, one commit back, and I'm going to look at index.html. Okay, so basically what it's going to show me is it's going to say, hey, these are the things that are subtracted, these are the things that are added, and we have, this is the typical hello world that got added. Okay, so I can actually see that right here by just looking at these two different things. Okay, so there's multiple ways that you can do this, and I'll show you another way here that is equivalent to what I just did. So we could do a get diff. I want to still go head, but I'm going to go up one from head and compare that to now index. Okay, and there I have it. Exactly the same. And the dash dash, if I do a get diff head one back dash dash index dot this, it's still going to give me the same thing, because this dash dash essentially says I want you to look at what's in the directory right now. It doesn't matter whether I've committed it yet or not, or whether I've staged it or not. So a lot of people just add that dash dash on there as kind of a thing, but you don't have to. If you're on a working directory and it's clean and you've committed everything, you can just do it the way it is. Okay, so how do we see these same things in something like Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio Community, Enterprise, whatever? Okay, in order to do this in Visual Studio Code, we're going to have to do an extension called getLens. And you'll notice this says 23.5 million downloads. So we're just going to go ahead and install this one. I'm going to say install it there to my WSL Ubuntu. And once we have that, with welcome, see what's in GetLens, get started, walk through, I recommend that you do this. GetLens is powerful, feature-rich, and highly customizable to meet your needs. To find intrusive or the current line, blame, annotation, distracting, no problem. Quickly turn them off and change how they behave with the options below. So you can always go back and read this on the website because it's on their GetLens website. So we're just going to kill that for right now, and we'll go back to our file view here. So to see what's changed in the previous edition, you can just go over here now and click. We've got a new open changes with previous revision, and you can just click that and see that what we've added was this piece right here. So and you'll notice that this says index 7db086a compared to B657064. Those are the two starting 7 characters of the hash code, so you can see the difference between the two of them. And it tells you which one is which. This is the older one, this is the newer one. Okay? So that's how you can view that with GetLens on Visual Studio Code. So if you want to do more than that, comparing the most recent one, you need to go over here to this new little GetLens icon over here. And I've minimized a lot of their stuff up here. This normally shows up at the bottom, and I highly recommend you do that. But if I want to, I can look at, my current one that I have, and I can select where I want to compare that. Now, the only place I can compare that is to this one I did 40 minutes ago. Select the index, and then my current master, whatever I have there, which would be compare with selected. So it's really not going to be that much different. If I want to, however, I can actually look at more than that. I can go into the README and I can select that for compare if I want to. So I can select that one. Yeah, so you'll notice I don't have any way of comparing this one to anything else because I haven't changed it. So this one hasn't changed since this first commit. So this is an index modified. This is the README added, but I don't have any place else where that one shows up. Okay, So this one was modified here, and I can look at it, but README hasn't been changed. So let's go ahead and change the README. Small repository, use only for examples. So I can save that and close it. This is modified now, and I can go in here and I can stage it or whatever, okay? So I can delete it permanently, do all sorts of stuff. All right. In order to work with this, of course, I need to go over to my source control here, and I can say, look, I have master repo 1 committed or ready to commit stage. I can show the commit graph if you want. I can look at the test repository, and it looks like I have the README down here is the only thing that's changed. So I can stage those changes, and now I have this as modified. And at this point, if I say commit updated README, this would be essentially the same thing I've been doing from the command line, and now I don't have any changes here. And if I go back over here now, you'll see I now have README where I can compare, select for compare with a previous, not a previous one, but a much earlier one, and I can compare with selected, and voila. Use this only for examples. So I updated that 28 seconds ago, and it looks like we're going from one to the next. I'm comparing two. All right. I do a little bit concerned that this shows that it is gone. If I'm looking at my README right now, use only for examples. If I compare this one, select for compare with this one, compare with, it just shows this as being subtracted from the current one. Maybe I need to compare this one first, and then compare that one next, and then it switches. So the order in which you do select them to look at does matter. So go from oldest to newest, and it'll show what you expect, that this one has been added here and this one not subtracted in the other one. Now, doing this in Visual Studio Code or from the command line is fine, but sometimes we want to do this from Visual Studio as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this, -r test repo to /mnt/user/desktop. Okay, so don't need to do -r for that. Okay, so I've moved the entire directory. It's not a problem. I can just work with it in Visual Studio from there. So let me switch over to that. Okay, so this is going to be kind of interesting because I'm going to open a local folder instead of a project. And I'm going to go on to desktop, and I'm going to look at my test repo and select that folder. And I'm just opening this as a folder, so I'm not doing anything here. Not now. I don't want to give feedback. Don't know why that was coming up so weird. But I also have now here at Get Changes different things that I can put in here. So there is a .Visual Studio that it adds in here. So I haven't changed any of that yet. I can do a commit all, I can do a push, I can drop this down and say, hey, I want to look at, the local master and switch branches and stuff like that. So I can do all of that kind of stuff from here. Let's start by just opening up the File Explorer for a moment and changing the index.html. And we're going to do another H1 and say goodbye VSCode, hello Visual Studio Community Edition. Okay, so we'll save that. And you'll notice right away this has a check mark here. So I can right click on here and there's a get menu, and so I can compare with unmodified if I want to. So here's my compare with unmodified. It's all built in here. You don't have to do anything unusual. And at this point, I can do a get, commit and stash, or undo changes, or history, compare with unmodified, plan or ignore, whatever. There's no reason why I can't do also from a command prompt. Now I have PowerShell ISE here just because if I do a get status, I now have this untracked files.vs. Now the interesting thing about it is that change is not staged for commit. Use get add file to update will be committed, and get restore to discard, which is in the working directory. And I have modified index.html, but I'm not tracking the .vs. And it says use get add file to include in what will be committed. Now, I don't want to track the .vs file. So at this point, we're ready to talk about get ignores. We'll do that in just a minute. So if I do a get commit here, -m, it would go through and commit it, okay? But I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to go ahead and just say, hey, let's go down to get, and I can commit this, okay? Or I can just go to get changes over here, and I can say, hey, this has been modified. Let's stage this to the staging, and then I can put in a message here and say, added message for Visual Studio Community. There we go. So we'll just say commit staged, and now it's committed. Now again, I don't have this here, so what I want to do is set up a get .get ignore, and what that does is it says, hey, don't even think about adding any of these. Just totally ignore them in this working directory. So let's look at that. Now in Visual Studio, this is not too bad. We can actually just go in here and say ignore these locals. And it will add this get ignore that has this /.vs. So the slash is the working directory's root. .vs is actually the name of the folder. The only problem is I now have this one here that's been added, and its status is added, and I need to commit that. I want the .get ignore to be in the repository. So I'm going to say added .get ignore, and I'm going to commit that staged one right there. So now there are no unstaged changes in the working directory, and I'm good to go. And I now have a get ignore, and everything is working wonderfully. Now, that being said, if you create a project like a C# project or something like that, so if I want to, I can go in, close this folder, and I can say, hey, let's create a new project, and let's say I'm working on a web form. ASP.NET Web Forms website. So maybe I'm doing something with a little bit older technology, and I click on Next, and it says, hey, where do you want to create this? The default place is in repos, and I go ahead and say yes. Create a delete me now website. 4.7. This seems to be the default for web forms instead of 4.8.1. Not sure exactly why that is the case, but I'll leave it that way for right now. And it'll go ahead and create that. And what happens at this point is that it's going to create, this default page and all this other kind of stuff. And I just want to go in here and say, hey, I really want to create a Git repository, and when I do that, I'm really only going to do it locally. I'm not going to do it on GitHub or Azure DevOps. But Azure DevOps, if you're already running on Azure, Azure DevOps is there, and you could use that if you wanted to. This gives me the local, and notice it says get.getIgnore template default Visual Studio. So this is going to create me a .ignore already. And I can just say, okay, yeah, create that. Save change the following solution. Yes, go ahead and save it. And then add the get. And you can see these are already all now locked. Okay, and if I go into the default.asp and I say asp.net web forms application and save that, you'll notice that this one now is ready to go. Okay, and if I just go over to my get changes, I'll have these changes here, and I can stage them all. Okay, that's generally what you would do. So I'm going to go ahead and say stage them all, and say minor change to get to application name. Okay, and I can commit staged, and we're good to go. So in Visual Studio, this is very easy to do, and it's all built in, and it's exactly what you would expect to do. Visual Studio Code requires some plugins, and of course, we can always do this back here in the command line. So if I wanted to, I can go back here and say get status. Okay, but if I wanted to, let's do get log. That's the log of everything that I've done so far. Updated README, modified, expanded the index, added the index, first commit of README, all of those. That was our original one. If I go to cd source, repos, and delete me now, and I do a get status here, I'm on the branch master, nothing to commit, working clean. And I can do a get log, and there'll only be a couple here. There'll be the minor change to the application name, then the adding the project files, and the adding of the get attributes and get ignore. Okay, so these are sort of done for us, and then the project files were added, and we just did this really, there's only one. The nice thing about this is that I can drop back over here, and you'll notice that it says, hey, you're on this commit created locally. If I want to, I can immediately go back and see what changed in here. This is my what changed in these commits, and boom, I'm looking at what changed. That's really nice. Just in the last commit. They usually don't need to go back multiple commits, and so if you want to, you can do that. But there you go. That's how we can do all these commits. So the only other conceptual thing that we've talked about is the get ignore, and that's done for you in Visual Studio. So if you're doing that, you don't need to worry about that part of it. It'll kind of do it for you automatically.